Alright guys, how you doing? It's Rabea, hope you're all well. So in this video, I wanted to give you a little mix breakdown as per heavily requested actually, which I really appreciate. But it's a mix breakdown of my last single, Nomads, which I did with Ben Minal. If you haven't heard it yet, it's on Spotify and all the streaming platforms. You can go and find it in the link in the description box. I did this as a presentation at the NAMM show this year on behalf of Neural DSP because I used my Archetype plugin for all the guitar sounds and all the layers and everything in this song. So it was a really cool opportunity to open up the session, get a little bit in depth on how I dialed in the tones and how I approach using that particular plugin to be able to create all the different layers and things like that. So hopefully this will be insightful for you guys if you got the plugin or use different plugins in the same kind of ilk, about how you can utilize them and manipulate the sound to really create so many different layers, give you a little bit more depth to your recordings and your productions. And it's another cool way of thinking about things rather than just, you know, guitar, bass and drums. You can actually start thinking like a producer in the sense of what might sound cool on this section, add a layer, so on and so forth. So I've got my Logic session open and I'm going to go through it. Hopefully it won't be a really long video, but we'll see. Last thing I want to say is that I am by no means a professional mixing engineer, so I just love doing it. Really enjoyed it over the last few years, so forgive me if there's any kind of weird techniques or approaches that some of you guys who are watching might be like, why is he doing that? In any case, I'm happy with the way it sounds, so let's get into it. All right, so you should be able to see my Logic session up on screen now. What we're looking at here is the arrangement window. If some of you guys use Logic, you're probably familiar with this. But what we've got here is, this is the drums here in the purple. Then I've got my main rhythm guitar, a bunch of layers here. We've got the bass in the brown section, and then we've got more layers and synth here at the bottom. We're looking at 39 tracks including buses, so that's pretty cool. It's not a really dense session. In any case, let's have a quick listen. Okay, so it opens with a big bang, basically. I guess I'll go over the drums first to give you an idea of what's actually happening here. So the drums are all listed here. I do have a bus set up, a few different buses for different things drums-wise. So we've got our main drum tracks here. I've got a parallel compression bus here. I've got a decap bus here. I've made another drum room here, and that's my drum master. So let's have a little listen, just check we've got everything. Yeah, so this is everything drums-wise. Let's do that again. So you can hear they're quite punchy. There's a lot of reverb going on to fill them out. It's like a lot of room and trashiness. I quite like an exciting kind of drum sound. So first thing I'll do is go over the main drum tracks here. It's worth saying that I recorded this in my new studio with Ben, and we've been dialing in the drum tones as we've been going. But one thing I fell short on this particular recording was the kick mic sounded really weird, which really annoyed me. So what I did was I used Stephen Slate Trigger 2 to add my own drum samples. So this is what it's like without. I mean, that's just without the trigger. It sounds horrible. So if I put that back in, basically I'm running, as you can see, a close mic and a sub kick of a Yamaha recording custom drum to give it a nice bit of fatness. And then the same thing is going on with the snare, actually. Rather than using a full snare sample in the sense of replacing it, I've just blended 60% in here just to give it a little more attack. So if I turn it off, you'll hear how the drum sounds without it. I'll turn it on. So you can hear it's pretty much the same. What it loses when you turn off trigger is a little bit of body and a little bit of attack. So with heavy music, it's so common to use samples to, you know, get the drums to punch and stand out a little bit more. So that's basically what's going on there with regards to the samples. And in this one, I'm using a Pearl Reference brass, top and bottom, and I'm using a Ludwig Black Beauty. I'm blending three different... Actually, no, I've muted this particular one. So I'm just using the snare top and a Ludwig Black Beauty snare sample here that I'm blending in 60% just to give it that attack. But what I was happy about was the snare recording itself works fine for me. I just wanted a little bit more definition and punch from the trigger, from the sample. So anyway, that's all. Everything else is natural, like all the toms and overheads and the room and stuff like that. So one of the things that's really cool is we're using something called the Sphere mic. It's basically a modeling microphone that Universal Audio have brought out. And what it allows you to do is record. It's a room mic. I've used it as a room mic in this instance. But then you load up this plugin called Sphere. Cool, thanks for that. And you can load on any kind of profile or capture, if you want to call it that, of a different microphone. And it's stereo. So I went for some Coles, as you can see here. And these are ribbon mics, and I'm using them in stereo. So this is the sound of the room. So I'm actually, you can hear it's very excited. So I'm running a decapitator on that, which is a sick plugin. That just gives it way more excitement. Let me just show you what it's like without. As you can hear, it's a massive difference. And because it was a little bit harsh, I use an EQ quite heavily here, but also I use something called Soothe 2, which essentially addresses all the harshness. It smooths everything out. It's a very sophisticated plugin called Soothe, and it's really, really handy for smoothing things out. So that's the main room mic that I used. I also have a trash mic, which is this Periscope Labs microphone. And the cool thing about this particular mic is that it has like this built-in compressor, which is madness, but it sounds really cool. This is what it sounds like on its own. And the cool thing with that is, although it's low, it adds a little bit of bloom to the sound overall. Right, so that's generally the interesting parts of the drums recording so far. I'll just show you what the drums themselves sound like. So we've got a parallel compression bus. And that I use smash and grab pretty much religiously. I find it one of the most useful, go-to, easy to dial in kind of drum plugins for compression. Really, really handy is smash and grab by GGD, so recommend that. Then I've got my decapitator bus, which sounds like this. I'm using an instance of Ocean Way Studio to build my own room, which I'm then crushing with decapitator. It's a technique that I've used in the past. It's really, really helpful. I learned a lot of this stuff off the Totemist sessions. I've actually loaded in a bunch of Totemist presets that I'd saved. So the cool thing with the decapitator bus is that for drums in heavy music, in the style I like to record, I like things to sound lively and intense and realistic. You know, I like all the modern metal stuff, but for me personally, a lot of the drum character is lost in modern progressive metal drums. And then finally, I've got a second room that I made. And again, this is using Ocean Way, a different room configuration, different mic configuration. So let me show you what these sound like. The parallel compression, the decap, and the Ocean Way Room 2, like this. And then if I blend that in with the drum master, which is all of these channels going to this one channel here, and then I've got like EQ compression and a bit of tape saturation on that. So this is the drums. Now, if I mute these three, You can hear how much life and power and punch that it adds to the mix of the drums in isolation. Now, if I play it within the song and I'll mute these three, you'll just hear how much difference it makes. And that's just without the parallel compression even. When I add that in, you get the punch. But that's the drums. And in terms of how I've mixed them throughout the track, the reason that I've got these buses up on my arrangement window is so that I can automate them. So you can see I'm automating volumes of so much stuff throughout the whole song. But mainly on the drums, I'm doing things like pulling parallel compression down, pulling that decapitator bus down in the room and stuff like that, and then bringing them back up for where it's needed. So in the intro, it's like all guns blazing. So that's why we've got things where they are like parallel compressions, unity blend with the main drum track. And then that's basically how I like to mix things. I just go through and automate. Once I've got the tone, I usually start with the heaviest section, get the drums to sound nice and powerful and clear in those bits, and then from there I use automation in quieter sections to bring things down. As long as I know that in the heaviest section everything's sounding big and full, then I can take away from that rather than trying to add more. I've done other mix breakdowns where I talk about this, so for those of you who've seen the other ones, probably nothing new, and for those of you who know about drum mixing and all the rest of it, you're probably thinking, interesting, some of that I wouldn't do myself, whatever. In any case, that is the drums. We used DW Collector Series drum kit that I've got in there. Ben used his own cymbals, and it was a really fun thing to do the drums. I'm very happy with how they sound on this track, especially when we get into the more chilled sections like this. The cool thing is that in isolation, these buses and stuff, they might sound really intense and really like, whoa, that's too much. But what I love is that when you put it in context with the mix, everything starts to sit. And that's one of the things that I love about mixing. I always mix rather than doing things in isolation and then bringing it all together. I try and have the whole thing playing and just get a vibe that way. I find that works for me personally. I'll quickly breeze over the bass, actually, because the guitars are probably the most in-depth thing to explain in this situation. But in regards to the bass, this is the sound that we've got for the main bass track. So that bass is my Warwick Corvette that I've had. I mean, it's Dave's, actually, but we've had it between us for the last, I can't even remember when. It used to be a friend of mine from school's bass that he got for his birthday one year, who then sold it to Dave years later, and now it's ended up at my house. I love that bass. It's an Ash. It's down there, actually. Warwick Corvette, Proline, and I think it sounds great, and I really, really like that bass. It really grunts at you. In terms of bass tone, I'm using my Quad Cortex from Neural DSP. All my bass presets are on my profile, so you can download them if you want. They're all on there. They're like heavy bass. I think this is EP2 heavy bass. I use this same preset for the Totemist stuff. It's just a great, angry, gnarly sounding bass tone. I'm very chuffed with that. I'm happy that I dialed it in and it's a preset I can record whenever I want. In terms of what we're doing, very basic subtractive EQ. I'm using... getting rid of this whistly frequency. It's a little bit, you can hear. Getting rid of a little bit of that intense kind of like shrill sound that you get from distortion, and then right up at the top as well. You can't even hear it. If I take this one off, you'll hear how much more intense it is. So that's useful because we don't want things to jump out and get in the way. There's so much guitar going on and high frequencies and high mids and stuff that the bass needs to be able to sort of push through the mix in its own way, so you can still hear the tone of it and all the rest of it. So subtractive EQ, find a slot in the frequency spectrum for your bass and for your guitar and so on. So that's the main kind of bass tone. And then in the verse, it's a very similar kind of sound, but it's way, way less distorted. I think I actually used the same preset and then just dialed back the distortion a little bit. I'm using a bunch of compression, like I use the UAD distressor, and I also sidechain a compressor to the kick. The reason that you do that is because when you sidechain a compressor to the kick, every time the kick sounds, it hits the compressor for the bass, so it actually allows the kick to pass through a little bit more. So rather than the two instruments fighting against each other because they're both bassy, sidechain compression allows the kick to poke through on top. It's very useful. I'll show you what happens. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's a subtle thing. But in the mix, it really allows the kick to sit nicely and push through properly. So those are the two main bass tones, and then I actually used a fuzz bass, which sounds like this. So they're all very similar tonally. It's just that the fuzz bass, I wanted something that was really, really intense and thick rather than getting a bunch of the sort of top end definition. I wanted more of this just like bellowing low end bass. So that's why I did the fuzz bass. So that's basically the bass tone. Again, all of those presets are available on my QC Quad Cortex app profile. You can download them. Right. Now into the meat and potatoes. So all the guitars. Let's start with the main rhythm guitars. So this tone. So this is a preset that's available on my plugin if you've got it. It's called Glitched Riffs. It's one of the first ones I made. And the really cool thing about this particular preset is that I'm blending in, as you can see, like, I don't know, a third of the synth. And the synth is tuned an octave above and an octave below, as you can see on both sides. And it's in pre mode. That means that the synth in the plugin is technically running through my amps and pedals in my plugin. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn it off, both of them, so you can hear what it sounds like without. And then I'm going to add them back in. So you can hear how suddenly it's added like a low octave on there. One of the cool things that I want to point out is that if I was to put this in post mode and leave the blend where they are, they would sound very separate because I wanted the synth to blend in with the guitar amp tone so that it sounded like one sound. In post mode, the synth happens after all the amps and effects and stuff, so that's why it would sound different and detached like this. So you can hear quite clearly the synth's doing its job, but it sounded separate, and there's a ton of like high-end stuff that's in there that I didn't want. So putting it in pre-mode glitched riffs is basically that. It's like blending the guitar amp with the synth, but still getting your guitar sound through as well, which gives this really awesome sound. So that's essentially the main rhythm tone for this song. I use it all over the place, like in this bit as well. So really sick. I love when you stop playing and the synth's still doing its job. It's funny. In terms of what else is going on in this preset, I'm running it, as I said, I'm running it through the entire signal chain. So we've got a compressor, we've got the octave in vintage mode, so it's giving us that Octavia tone. We've got the fuzz in vintage mode as well, so that's the bender, the tone bender style fuzz. Absolute insanity. Running the crunch amp, quite low gain as you can see, but I'm running the high gain cab, which is like a V30 loaded cab. So it's a similar sound to what I know, especially for the heavy stuff. I really, really enjoy it. As you can hear this section. One of the best things about this particular preset, which I'm sure if you guys have used it, you'll probably know this, but because the synth is based on pitch detection, one of the things I discovered with glitched riffs, which is why I made the preset, is that when you hit like a natural harmonic or more than one string, because it's a subtractive mono synth, it can only sound one note at a time. So when you like strike 4th fret natural harmonic or something, or even more than one string, it's searching for a pitch, and sometimes it glitches out like mad, and it really creates this awesome sound. So let me show you this ending section. Once again. Which I just think sounds absolutely wild. But if I take off the synth now, so you can hear what happens and how it actually sounds without, nowhere near as glitchy. So as you can hear, when you take the synth off, it is still quite an erratic section, but throwing that synth on there, allowing it to search for the pitch and do the glitchy stuff, really made it for me. So that's one of the coolest things for me with that particular preset, and one of my favorite features of the plugin, that it allows you to do that. So that's the main rhythm tone. Let's move on. I've got a thickener as well, so just to give you an example how that sounds. So that's running the crunch amp with the gain really high, the mid boost in. I'm running the octave, the Chaos Bed Octaver with full octave, and the Paragon Overdrive to give it a little more mids. And then also I'm running the doubler, so that's allowing it to shift into the stereo field, just thickening up either side. So let me show you without. Now if I take it off doubler, it sounds like this. You can hear that thickness right in the middle now, and it's actually gonna, for me, take away from the width. So that's why I threw the doubler on. It's a really handy little feature that they put in the more recent plugins. So you get the idea. Let's move on to some more like ambient tones. So this is what we've got running in the verse. So, in the verse, what I'm running is, I guess, on the left-hand side, the actual part that I wanted to play on the guitar. And then on the right-hand side, it's called ambient echo, because what it is essentially the same chords, but I've got the blend higher on the delay and the mix really high on the delay. So it's actually acting like an echo on the right-hand side of the stereo field when you've got your headphones in. And then on the left-hand side, so you can hear how it's adding dimension rather than double tracking the same part on both sides. I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I find Carnival do this a lot. I mean, this song is so Carnival, but they'll have like a main guitar part you can hear in one headphone, and then on the other side, it's like the same kind of thing, but it's just, it's heavily affected, or it's the same part, but like so heavily affected that it sounds different, and it just creates a little bit more dimension and space. So I really like that. So those are the two main kind of ambient tones for the verse. And something else that's worth pointing out is that I can run the delay in front of the amp using the pre and post switch. So it's going to give me way more of that cascading effect that happens when you put delay in front, like the gain stage is getting hit harder with all the repeats, and it creates that wonderful sort of shoegazy sound that we all know and love. And then lastly in the verse there, we just got some 16th note chugs. That's the crunch amp with the Paragon overdrive, and I'm running the doubler. So really simple, but it just adds rhythm to the section on top of the fact that the bass is doing the same thing. And I'm playing a fifth above the root there. And then I'll show you the riff tone that I used for this next section. So that is a really cool tone. I love that kind of heavy tone. Again, running the crunch amp with the gain high on one side and the gain a bit low on the other, V30 cab, and I've got the vintage fuzz on the left. Because I'm running the gain lower on the left, I wanted more from the pedal, and then on the right, I'm running the gain higher, and I've got the Paragon overdrive, which is nowhere near as much gain as the fuzz. But you get a really nice blend of the two. Right, next section. This is cool because we're running some synth now, but also some nice clean vibes, so check it out. So those are the clean guitars that you hear. And again, I'm running overdrive, compressor. I'm running the clean amp in this situation with the crunch cab. I tend to do that. I like to mix and match the cabs and the amp heads. So I've got synth going on here, and this is very, very basic in terms of like what I've actually done. I'm running the synth in post mode. I've got a fifth sort of, as you can see, it's an octave above, and then I'm running a fifth above that, which gives it this sound. Which is really basic, but it just adds such a lovely dimension to that section. So, as you heard, very easy to dial that in. It's quite a simple sound that I used. And it's just, yeah, like I said, it sounds like strings. That's kind of what I wanted, like this bed of like extra ambience that happened underneath the chords. And the next one is where I bring in like what I would consider like synth horns in a way. I've dialed them into sound kind of like horns. So let me show you what they sound like. And they're very, very, as you can hear on their own, quite cutting, because I'm running the drive on the synth there, and the cutoff is quite high up. And running the doubler as well to give it a little bit more width. So that would be the main sort of bulk of the synth there. We move into the Colossal section now. So in that section, you can hear there's like messy guitar going on. I deliberately wanted it to sound messy and erratic because we're going into a really intense riff section. So these are the kind of things that in my head I'm going, yeah, that'd sound cool. You just grab your guitar and you track it in. It's worth saying this song, I think I did all of this in 72 hours. So I really wasn't messing around. I was rushing this through, not in a negative sense, but I was just so excited to get the song done that I was just grabbing the guitar, dialing in a sound on the plugin and just tracking it and just moving forward. So that's why there are little scraps and pops and weird bits of performance here and there, but I quite like that. I just think in the essence of excitement, why not? So let's move on to this next section now. This is running the Octavio Fuzz. Which just sounds mental, but once again, in the mix. So this particular sound is probably my favorite sound that I dialed in on this song. It was complete fluke, and it sounds like this crazy organ sound. There's a link in the description box to the preset, but check this out. It's crazy. It sounds so cool. So I'm running the synth into the amplifiers. I've got the detune right up. Now, if I take this down, check this out. So by having the detune effect on there, it's creating oscillations that are happening faster and faster the higher up I turn that knob. And that just created this amazing organ sound. Like, it just sounds like this crazy organ on crack. So I really, really like that. So we're about to get into the final bit of the song. This is the big epic, open it up after all the tension. You got tension and release. Now it's just big epic chords and stuff like that. So first thing I'll show you is the main riff tone. It's just adding a bed of guitar sound. It's the same rhythm tone that we used for the other section, the riffing thing with the fuzz and the overdrive on the crunch amp. So then we've just got those two, we got bass, and then we got these two layers, and that's really all that was going on. So this is the ambient echo layer. The ambient echo is very subtle. It's only really meant to be there just to give more ambience to the synth section. But what we've got going on again is delay in pre-mode. We're running the crunch amp into the clean cab this time because it's got a little more mid-range to it. It's like a thinner, well, not thinner sound, but it's definitely got nowhere near as much low end. So super simple part, but it sounds really lovely on top of the synth. So this is my EDM synth sound. What's nice about this one, and something a little bit different you might not have tried if you've got the plugin, is I'm running it in pre-mode, so it's running through the amplifier again. It's running through that. We don't have any pedals on, just the amplifier, but I actually turned off the cab. So this is what it's like with the cab on. Gives it all of that noise that in synth is really handy for allowing it to cut through. A lot of synthesizers have like a noise knob or something like that. This is my version of it inside the plugin. We've got the drive and again the filter cutoff and stuff to give lots more intensity, but if you're running it in pre-mode, you can go ahead and turn the cab off and it will give you that top end that you need. And I've tamed it with the EQ. If I show you without, really, really cool. Again, how you can just sculpt the sound, all played with my guitar. This is the kind of thing that I was trying to get at with the purpose of this video, and what I was talking about at NAMM was if you've got an idea in your head that you can use with the plugin, something like this particular plugin, or the Tim Henson one is a great example, where there are these producer tools inside, like the Synth, you know, where you start thinking wider than just a guitar sound, wider than just, you know, like guitar, drums and bass for modern rock and metal and stuff, and think, what can I achieve with something like this? Well, it's just a case of sitting down and messing with it. And if there's an idea in your brain, like for me, I knew that's the sound I wanted, like this EDM kind of like top line melody to go over that section. It's like, how can I achieve that with this plugin? I might not be able to, I might have to go and use a software synth, but I'm going to try first, because my personal primary medium for writing is guitar. So again, it's serving its purpose exactly how I dreamed it would. By creating these layers that don't sound anything like guitar, but they do the job in the song. So I'm really chuffed with that. That's another sound that I've saved at this link in the description box called EDM Synth. But yeah, so that's that. So just quickly there, I was soloing the Thickener on top of the glitchy riffs. So you can hear same things happening with the bass here. Where is it? Here you go. Well, there you go. That's the end of the song, and hopefully this isn't going to be a mega long video. Hopefully John can cut this down. If you are interested in any of the other sort of mixing approaches and stuff like that, then please let me know in the comment section below. But yeah, generally speaking, I've been over this kind of stuff in the past. It's generally just EQ compression and a bit of tape saturation in the right place on the drums. My master bus, I haven't changed for years now, for the last couple of years, but I use the Shadow Hills compressor into an SSL compressor, into an EQ, into another EQ, which you can't see for some reason, I don't know why that is, into another EQ, into a tape emulator, then into another EQ for mids and sides, so I can put some of the high end or the mid range and clean up the stereo image and stuff like that, so it's not all clogged. Then into Soothe, you know, as the mastering kind of like smoothing it out, make it a little less harsh on your ears, and then into a limiter, which I use JST Clip's a great limiter, but I don't actually, when I got that mastered by Mark Roberts, you take the limiter off. But it's interesting, like let me just take all these, turn all these off so you can hear how it sounds. I have the master chain always engaged, and I track into it and record into it because I know how it sounds. I've found a sound that works for me, and generally, you know, I tweak it over the months that I use it and stuff like that, over the years or whatever, refine it always. But I'm happy with my master chain, so I know that that's going to work, so I always work to that. It's called top-down mixing, apparently. It's a technique that I wasn't aware of until I watched a video of Nolly talking about it. As I always talk about in other mix breakdowns is you want to group things, so like grouping your drums into a bus, master bus, and then sending them to things like a room, like a decapitated bus, like I mentioned. Exactly the same thing with the guitars. Like I can solo just the guitars in this section. Have a listen. know, I've got my layers. That's set to another bus that I can then control with EQ compression. I use a UAD K stereo, which is this thing that allows you to send things into the stereo image and mess with them and get them to sit nicer. I've got thickeners in one place. I've got my cleans in another bus. Rather than having to affect individual tracks, I can send them to the clean bus and then put an EQ and compression on them together, so I don't have to do too much messing around. Same with the synths. I used just a general EQ there. I barely even touched it. But the other reason that you would do that, outside of being able to affect the sound of them, is that when I go into automation, you can see I've got things like my buses here. I've got my drum bus here, all the rooms and stuff like the guitar bus, and I can just go in and actually mix. It's as if I'm stood in front of a mixing desk and I'm moving the faders. When you look at it in this view, that's essentially what's happening. I'm able to go in and automate the volume. Not only automate the volume, you could automate anything in that regard. So I could go into, let's say, this ambient guitar track. If I go into automation mode, drop down, you can see I've got volume. I can automate the pan. I can automate send stuff. Go down to Archetype Rabea. Like every neural plugin, I can automate every single aspect of the plugin. So I can automate a preset change. I can automate the transposition. I can automate the synth. Like, look at all this stuff in the synth window. You can automate all of this stuff and get really in depth if you want to. I think that's just, it's amazing, really. In the same way that, like, if I go into the, you know, like the fuzz, I can automate the amount of all the different controls of it. So I might want the fuzz to start with a less gain, and then as the section goes, I can automate more gain dialed in, stuff like that. It's like having someone down on your pedal board turning the knobs at the same time. Amazing. Anyway, I've rambled long enough. This video is going to be really long. So I just want to say thank you for bearing with me and watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed the track. If you've not heard it yet and you like the sound of this, please go and listen to it, download it. It's on Bandcamp, it's on Spotify, all the streaming platforms. We're going to be doing more. And yeah, I'm going to try and keep doing this kind of thing if you guys like it. So thank you for requesting another mix breakdown. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. I've been Rabea, and I will see you all very soon.